Rumors have been floating around for a few days now about a possible remake for Need for Speed's biggest title, Most Wanted. It started with a post from Simone Bailey, the actress who played Cross's partner in Most Wanted, specifically saying that a Most Wanted remake is being released in 2024. And then she tagged EA and Criterion. Now, this post has since been deleted, but there is still a post up on her Instagram where she's standing next to Dean McKenzie, who played Cross. Now, I've never been one to dive deeply into rumors or get my hopes up based on unofficial information like this, so this video is not going to discuss the validity of the rumors or how likely I think this remake is. You can make your own conclusions on that. Instead, I want to talk about what a Most Wanted remake could and should look like. I think this is always an interesting discussion when, remaking old games like this of what to keep, what to update, how faithful you should stay to the original material. So let's dive in with first what I think personally is the most likely option here for a Most Wanted remake in 2024. It's fair to say, especially if we trust that deleted post, that Criterion would be developing the remake. And this likely means that the game would be made in Frostbite, the engine used to make all the more recent NFS titles. This comes with a lot of likely possibilities. For example, we probably wouldn't get cars that handle like 2005's Most Wanted. The handling would likely feel similar to Unbound. Cops would also probably use similar AI to what we've seen in games like Heat and Unbound, instead of using the AI and tactics from Most Wanted. As for the car list, this could be a tricky one. It's hard to license vehicles, especially older ones, and Need for Speed hasn't recently been able to secure licenses for brands like Toyota and Lexus. In fact, none of the Most Wanted starter cars are in modern Need for Speed games, and Toyota and Stellantis are known for being stingy with who they give licenses to. So I do feel like bringing back the original car list might be a long shot. To keep with the licensing discussion, as many gamers know, music licensing can be really challenging in the industry, and even though Most Wanted's soundtrack is a major part of the DNA of the game, it might just not be possible to license all those same songs. So if you combine these thoughts with the knowledge that Simone Bailey and Dean McKenzie are presumably involved in this rumored remake to record new lines or even film new live-action cutscenes, I think this all kind of leads up to a game that's more of a spiritual successor to Most Wanted instead of a true one-to-one remake. And if the soundtrack isn't the same, the cars aren't the same, the cops aren't the same, and the story isn't the same, is it even worth calling it a remake at all? I mean, I'm not even sure Rockport's layout would be the same, because by modern standards, the map is somewhat small. So I feel instead what we're more likely to get is a world inspired by the original Rockport, with the same districts. I'm sure Rosewood and the downtown area would still be there and roughly in the same orientation with similar landmarks, but the map could be expanded on. I feel like we would also end up with a car list similar to what Need for Speed has been using for the past few games. I mean, obviously the modern games have a much bigger roster. We're now floating around 140 cars in-game instead of less than 40. So if they aren't sticking with the original list, it would be a bit odd for them to slim down the modern roster too much. Instead, I'd think they would just try to add some of the Most Wanted cars and customization into that modern list, with perhaps some returning body kits and vinyls, which were never licensed, so would be easier to bring back. And again, with the actors possibly returning to record new material, I just don't think we're gonna get a carbon copy of the original story. So is this something players would want? A game that feels like a modern Need for Speed, but injected with some Most Wanted flavor, with a world inspired by Rockport, a big car list with a few Most Wanted favorites and customization sprinkled in, a handful of the original songs probably mixed in with a more modern metal and rock soundtrack, and a story that continues the original or retells it in a new way. Well, it certainly wouldn't take anything away from the original. People can always still enjoy the 2005 game if they want, But at that point, I just don't feel like it's worth it to make a modern game tied to Most Wanted in the first place. I mean, we already have Most Wanted 2012, which was kind of supposed to be a sequel, then they backed away from that, but still just called it Most Wanted, confusing everyone. So do we really need a third game called Most Wanted that's also a different game from the original? I'd love to see them instead work on better original projects. But let's now enter Fantasyland here and pretend that the struggles and realities of the industry don't exist and Criterion is free to make the best possible remake they can. There are, I'm sure, still some things players would want to see changed. Of course, the easy one here is graphics. Most everyone would love to see Rockport rebuilt in a modern engine with amazing lighting and detail, and see the cars get a makeover as well. But even here, one of the big things I'm curious about is whether or not they keep the piss filter. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but if you played the game on PC, like I did, this is actually just a graphic setting you can turn on or off. No mods needed. But most people didn't play this on PC when it came out, and the lovely yellow Vaseline smeared post-processing effect is kind of an important part of what makes Most Wanted feel like Most Wanted to a lot of people. I'm always a fan of options, so I personally would love to see a setting to bring this back. Maybe don't make it default, but having an optional retro filter of sorts would be really cool. Some of my favorite game remakes lately have also had an option to switch between the modern and original graphics on the fly. Now, this of course implies that the map would have to be the same, otherwise the effect doesn't really work. But again, we're in Fantasyland here, and I actually think it would be really cool to expand on the original Rockport map by making each area a bit larger and more detailed with more roads to drive, but doing that in both the original and new art style, and then letting players toggle between them at any time. Having a bigger, more full Rockport that you could drive in the original art style is kind of a dream come true to me. Speaking of the driving, this is a tough one for me. Honestly, Need for Speed has never really nailed their handling, in my opinion. I mean, some of the best drift cars in Underground 2 and Unbound are front-wheel drive, and that should tell you all you need to know. So for me, I would want them to ditch the modern handling and instead focus on refining the original handling. Most Wanted does feel pretty good at speed, especially in the right car, but I'd love to see better, less shaky and floaty low-speed handling, and actually a better speed breaker. Of course, speed breaker has to come back, but I'd love to see it made more useful in a race setting instead of just being a way to plow through roadblocks or take 90-degree corners at 100 miles an hour without using the brake. Now for the cars themselves, of course I would like to see every original car return, with the same starter cars, but I'd like to see more too. Take maybe every car from the modern roster that released before 2005 and throw it in. They should still feel on theme for the original era of the game, but give us a lot more to play with. Now for customization, here is where I'm definitely interjecting some of my own wild thoughts. I would actually like to see them expand on Most Wanted's customization by using the Underground 2 and or Carbon system. See, Most Wanted, when compared to UG2 or Carbon, had much more limited customization. Of course, Carbon had the famous auto sculpt, and Underground 2 had dozens of bumpers, skirts, and wings, headlights, taillights, trunk customization, hydraulics, nitrous purges, and so much more. Most Wanted admittedly pales in comparison, so I think it would be neat to kind of mash up the best of the Black Box era customization into a Most Wanted remake. Now for the AI and cop system, I think the racing AI could use some adjustment. Of course, I would love it if they didn't rubber band like crazy, because it just feels like they're cheating. I mean, they are. Racing against NPCs that are bound by the same physics you are always feels better. And that's a big ask in reality, but again, this is Fantasyland, and it's what I'd love to see. Truly difficult and competent AI that is better because they drive better, not because the game gives them superpowers. For the cops, this one might ruffle some feathers because for the time especially, the cop AI was incredible and it is one of the most beloved features of the game. And it does still hold up really well, but it's not flawless. I would love to see the same heat level system and same unit types, but I would want them to tweak the AI. The lower levels were definitely a bit of a bore until you hit kind of heat 3 or 4, and due to hardware limitations, the original game had cops spawning out of nowhere, often right in front of you. And they could bust you through walls or even above or below you on different roads because they just had a 3D radius and didn't care about line of sight. The modern cop system does at least handle those things better, and I think using the modern AI as a base, but then boosting difficulty, especially at low speeds, and adding in some more maneuvers that the old AI used would be my more ideal system. And just for the record, Pursuit Breakers absolutely need to make a return. So the only other major aspect here is the story and campaign, and this is another tough one for me. I love the Blacklist system. It was one of the most enjoyable campaign experiences ever put into a racing game. So the return of the Blacklist is a must, even with the same characters, but maybe add some more depth. Give each boss more voice lines, more unique race events, an extra intro cutscene maybe, just something to kind of flesh out each Blacklist member and add a bit more variety to each phase. I wouldn't want to add much length or padding to the campaign as a whole because I feel like the pacing and overall length of Most Wanted was pretty much perfect. But making the events a bit more unique and themed to each boss would be a good way to make each Blacklist phase feel different from the last. And for the story as a whole, I'd love to see perhaps some type of Final Fantasy VII Remake style twist at the end. For those out of the loop and not worried about a general Final Fantasy spoiler, the FF7 Remake follows the same story as the original, pretty much right up until the end when it suddenly throws a big twist at you that changes how you see the whole game. Now, obviously Final Fantasy is a much more story-focused franchise than Need for Speed, so I don't need some crazy multiverse theory in NFS, but something to surprise fans familiar with the original story could be cool. Spoilers for Most Wanted incoming, maybe add in a epilogue/prologue to Carbon after you cross the bridge, as a way to more directly link up the two games. I think there's some really interesting possibilities there. Or even just have that final pursuit pan out differently. Maybe have your character get busted in an unwinnable chase, causing you to have to start over, but unlocking a new game plus with a new Blacklist and more challenges. Either way, I know some people watching this, maybe even most of you, would just want a shot-for-shot remake with everything the same as the original, but with updated graphics. And that, of course, wouldn't be a bad thing. I think it would be an easy win if they could do it, and it could bring Most Wanted to a whole new generation of gamers. But honestly, I would just say if you want that, play the original, especially on PC at higher resolutions and even with mods. It really does hold up well. I just played it last year and loved it. And I do personally think a remake is a chance to do some things better or expand on what players loved from the original. The original Most Wanted is here to stay, so I'd love to see them do a sort of Most Wanted 2.0 for the 2024 release. And everything we talked about today kind of covers the major beats I'd like to see for that. But I obviously didn't talk about everything here, and my opinions are just that, my own opinions. So let me know what details would be important for you to see return, and where you agree or differ with what I'm hoping for. I'd love to see what the community as a whole feels about this. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.